The boy woke up after being slapped on the head. His father, the mayoress, looked at him in disappointment, saying he was the shame of the family. But what they didn't know was that Yurin could master every martial art in the world. The problem was that right now, he was just a fat, ugly boy with no power. In the Kingdom of Crisis on the northern border, an army advances. Its Duke Ellen is stunned, shouting that it's unbelievable. Zombies rise and walk towards them. Ellen remarks that their numbers exceed his imagination, and there's a nightmare poison mist. A soldier tells the Duke to look up, and he is startled. There's even an undead knight, Durian. Not even one of the 10 high-level knights among the living could guarantee a victory against him. He says that with their current strength, they can't win and should retreat to hold for a moment. Ellen replies that they can't as the wall is already damaged. If the gate falls, their kingdom is finished. No matter the sacrifice, they must hold them back today. But something flashes past his side. A young man on horseback, his crimson cape flowing, takes over the battlefield. Ellen asks who is advancing so recklessly, and the soldier recognizes him. They're reinforcement from the southern Marquiade of Rocks, Yurin Rocks, the one who fights with daggers. The soldier tries to say his opponent is Durian. A mere dagger could never cause damage until the weapon is driven into the zombie's eye, sinking deep and severing the undead's head from its body. Ellen is shocked, and the knight wonders if Durian was merging. He wonders how it's possible. As Yurin throws his daggers, each one hits a zombie and begins to dissolve their monstrous forms, melting them all with a single strike, making people wonder if he's a saint sent from the heavens. Yurin thinks they shouldn't be ridiculous. It was simply anything good for the body he would take for himself. 6 months earlier, the young man wakes up suddenly. He wonders where he is as a maid approaches the young master. Yurin lifts his head and says she's a beauty, but her clothes are strange and she's carrying a sword. The woman asks how the young master is feeling. She says she'll call the priest this time. Yurin extends his hand, getting the woman's attention. He says he just wants to ask something, but the girl has already left. He gets out of bed, wondering where on earth he is. Then he looks to the side and sees his fat figure in a mirror. He wonders where his young, handsome form went and why he turned into a fat kid. Unable to believe it, the young man tries to convince himself it's all a dream, and if he goes back to sleep, maybe he'll wake up. The priest approaches and says, the young master has finally awakened. Then a man appears in the room and calls him a bastard. The disgrace who tarnished his family's name has finally woken up. The priest tells his lord that he has just woken up and the punishment can wait. The man grumbles a bit, and the priest says that for someone beaten unconscious, he isn't too badly hurt. His mind is stable and most of the wounds have healed, which is a relief. However, the Lord shouts that he would have preferred it if he had lost his life because he was harassing his fiancée. He was a beast. He's 19 years old and it's time to grow up. Even his younger brother has awakened his aura, but the older brother is still fat and without a shred of energy. Yurin repeats this completely shocked. The Lord turns warning that when he recovers, he must go to her and beg for forgiveness. Yurin repeats her, and his father replies that it's his wife, Ilya, and if she doesn't forgive him, he will be truly punished. He asks if he understands, and the protagonist accepts. The Lord warns that in any case, he must stop bringing disgrace to the family name. Yurin trembles in fear, wondering if this is his identity, so he must be Wellington Rocks. The Lord is surprised to be called by his name. He calls him a brat and slaps his face for being so bold as to call his father by his name. The fat boy is beaten for several seconds. The priest tries to calm his lord, but without success. Yurin thinks it can't be real. This must be a dream. He regains consciousness after a while and sits up startled. He wonders why he hasn't woken up in the real world. The woman approaches, asking if he is finally awakened. Yurin calls out for Aaron, and the woman responds, but she's confused when there's no further contact. The protagonist asks if he's stuck here because he messed with Ilya and got knocked out. Aaron confirms, but questions why he's suddenly speaking so politely. Yurin agrees and asks if he was really beaten like that. The woman confirms and says that to be precise, he tried to harass Miss Ilya and she beat him until he passed out. The protagonist curses his life, leaving the girl confused as he screams that he's screwed because there was no doubt. Somehow he had been transmigrated into the web novel he wrote, but not as the protagonist. Instead, as the trashy villain who embarrasses the main character and dies a miserable death. He complains that this can't be his fate. Aaron calls for her young master, but he continues freaking out, saying this wasn't a webtoon, a word unknown to the woman. Yurin thinks the body he possessed was a good-for-no piece of crap. No talent, no skill, no effort. Living only off his family's prestige, he loses his fiancée to the protagonist. He tries to ambush him for revenge, but gets beaten up instead, and he loses his life pathetically in a nameless alley. Yurin wonders how he'll survive in such an uncertain world, reflecting that it's a fantasy world, and he has no idea about the fat boy's abilities. But at least he knows about the fated encounters and items the protagonist hasn't obtained yet. So he decides he'll prepare quickly as he sits up in bed, but he's hindered by the poor center of gravity of his fat body. Eren asks if the young master is okay. Yurin replies that he's definitely not, but he notices something different. The girl says he should be resting. The protagonist thinks he couldn't see it just now, but that's why he frowned earlier. A system screen was next to Eren. It said the girl's abilities were Swift Sword, Clear Mind Mirror, and Aura Adaptation. The girl calls to the young master once more. Yurin denies it, saying he went crazy for a few seconds, but is fine now, and she should get back to her duties. Eren accepts and turns to leave while the protagonist watches her. He reflects on the Swift Sword. Originally, Eren was a character much stronger and more talented than normal knights, but he wonders what this affinity thing was, which was at 0. He wonders if it's a dating sim appearing because he's played so many of them. He wants to know what kind of world building this is. The protagonist thinks for a bit. The affinity isn't negative, which is good considering Yurin's usual behavior, but that wasn't the important part. He looks at his own body in the mirror, waiting for the system screen to appear. He shouts, "Yes," and looks at his status screen, which shows the Eye of Creation skill and the 4 heavens of the Tang clan. He thinks he has some special abilities, but among them the 4 heavens of the Tang clan skill. It was from that Wookiee webtoon he loved because the heroine was extremely beautiful. It's the clan that specializes in poisons and hidden weapons. The world building was a mix, but he decides to wait and see because if he can learn the martial arts of the 4 heavens of the Tang clan, he'll have a great chance of survival here. This was a martial art from a renowned sect in the 4 heavens province in Wookiee novels, known for various poisons and specializing in silent assassination. He wonders why it's here if this is supposed to be a medieval fantasy world, but it means he can unlock his abilities. Wellington walks to his room until Eren calls for her lord. He asks if his son has woken up and the girl confirms. Wellington wants to know how he looks. Eren replies that he didn't seem completely well yet. He fell when he tried to stand up and his overall condition seemed poor. Wellington says that Father Aelio told him the wound wasn't deep. But his son seemed a bit strange because before if he had told him to ask Ilia for forgiveness, he would have thrown a tantrum. But now he strangely just accepted it. His personality hasn't changed. He's just dazed. Tomorrow he'll probably be furious and seeking revenge on Ilia. Eren says her young master will gradually get better. Wellington turns around irritated, leaving the girl shocked. He says that even his own father has given up on him. But the girl still believed he should feel bad for the girl and let her live her life as a knight. He wonders how hard it must be to serve under him. But Eren thinks otherwise because today the young master seemed different somehow, and it was hard to explain. Earlier Eren had yelled, asking what he was talking about. He replies that he just wants to exercise a bit, and she should show him the way. Eren questions if he's really going to train right now, and Yurin confirms asking what the problem is. His Creator's Eye ability allows him to see stats, but he had no idea how to unlock the martial art of the Tang clan of Sichuan. Maybe it's because of his obesity. For now, he'll just exercise until he find a way. Yurin thinks that this mansion is gigantic, the size of several stadiums, and he's already exhausted. But if he tries to exercise in his room, his fat self will just keep going back to bed. He should definitely skip exercising at home. And also, all the servants he encounters look at him with extreme disgust. But considering what a bastard Yurin used to be, he can't blame them for it. They keep walking and Yurin asks if they're close yet. Eren replies that they're almost there. This is the 3rd training center, and most of the knights use the 1st and 2nd ones. Yurin suddenly notices someone in front of him, seeing that the affinity was 91 with a chance of taking his life. This man was Ray Alien, who calls out to the young master, questioning what brings him to his training hall. Yurin recognizes him immediately, and the man laughs, saying it's an honor that the young master still remembers him. Yurin agrees and looks at the sword frightened. Then he suddenly calls for Eren, asking if something had happened between them. Eren asks if he doesn't remember because a few years ago when the Maras forced him to train, the furious young master called Ray an apprentice knight, and he scarred his face with a sword while laughing. After that, the Maras gave up on making him train. Yurin shouts that there was no way. Ray glances at him from the corner of his eye, thinking he's a hopeless piece of trash. Yurin decides he's going to run away. He asks if there's another training hall, as he'd like to use one by himself. Eren says this is the 4th hall, but it's so far away and the equipment is bad, so it's probably empty. Yurin replies that it's perfect and they should go there because if he's going to lose weight, he should do it properly. The bodyguard accepts and tells him to follow. She points out the 4th training hall, and Yurin is panting from the walk. He looks down, seeing a table of equipment, while thinking that the Tang clan of Sichuan specializes in throwing knives. So he decides he should probably give it a try. Looking at the targets in front of him, Yurin aims at one of them and brings the dagger up to his face. He pulls his arm back and throws with all his might. But the dagger just clatters to the ground, failing to hit its target. He complains, thinking he could have unlocked it, but he notices Eren behind him. So he makes an excuse, saying he just threw it for fun. He should build some basic stamina first, and decides he'll run a few laps around the hall. He's going to train on his own, so Eren can do whatever she wants. Wellington questions this in complete disbelief, because Yurin had gone to the training grounds and started working hard. It was strange, and he wondered how long it would last. 3 weeks pass, and the Lord says that for 3 whole weeks, he hasn't stopped training. The boy had lost a lot of weight, and his appearance had changed remarkably as expected of his son. Without all that fat, he's actually quite handsome. Wondering if he has truly matured. Back at the castle, he thinks he's lost a lot of weight, but the Tang clan of Sichuan technique refused to unlock. He'll try for a month, and if it doesn't work, he'll just steal some of the protagonist's lucky encounters. Eren suddenly arrives, saying she brought dinner, and the boy thanks her. It was Sherain's soup, a nutrient-rich meal, excellent for burning fat and building muscle. Yurin complains about the food, and Eren asks if he's tired of it. He confirms as he's been eating nothing else for 3 whole weeks, and the girl calls out to the young master asking what he really wants to lose weight or to become a knight. Yurin replies that he'd like to become a knight, and Eren says that in this territory, even the powerful Marquis eats Sherain's soup after training, so the young master should stop complaining and just eat the soup. Yurin reluctantly accepts her orders. He thinks to himself, you live and you learn, but wonders what kind of old custom this is. Anyway, this soup had helped him lose fat, so he'll just eat it for now. He scoops some onto his spoon and brings it to his mouth. Yurin notices something different and wonders what it is because today the chain soup tasted a little different. The system screen appears before him, warning that he has ingested poison, but another notification also pops up in a chain because he had satisfied the condition to unlock the Tang clan of Sichuan. The skill has been unlocked, leaving him in complete disbelief. Suddenly, the Marquis hears a knock on his door and says to come in. It's his wife who says she brought some tea. And GT. Ka was the second wife, and she asks what he's looking at so intently. Wellington replies that he was just thinking about how beautiful the garden was. Ka says she's been personally taking care of it with great attention, and her husband compliments her admirable skills. But his wife suddenly grabs him from behind, questioning when he will choose Colin as his heir, just as he had mentioned before. Since it's already been decided anyway, it would be good to do it quickly. Wellington resists the hug and calls out to Ka, telling her that it will take a little more time. Ka asks why since he'd said he would name him last month. The Lord confirms, but adds that she's probably heard as well. Recently, it seems Yurin has finally come to his senses, and he is the eldest son of House Rocks. If he really puts in the effort, he could be a good successor. Kina says that's true, and she's heard a lot about it too. She was worried, but at least he seems to have her covered, and that must be a relief for her husband. Wellington says it's funny to think that after being beaten by his fiancée, he actually woke up. But Ka asks what he's going to do about the successor. The Lord replies that Yurin has only been training for 3 weeks, and it's better to watch him for a little longer. But he promises that if Yurin returns to his old ways, he will immediately give the title of heir to Colin. Kina says she'll go to her room first, and that he should finish his work quickly. Finally leaving the Duke's room, she bites her lip in anger. She calls out Yurin's name and tells him to just wait and see. Back in the room, he's amazed to have unlocked the skill. Then he says that the Tang family of Sichuan specializes in poison, and the condition to unlock it was to ingest poison. But stopping to think, he looks at the soup's stats again because there was an icon, and he wants to know what's above it. Looking at it made the text scroll down, seeing that it even showed a Hanyong herb used for paralysis. The boy seems excited, and Eren is confused, wondering why the young master isn't eating. Yurin replies that he will eat and brings another spoonful to his mouth. As he chews, he thinks for a bit longer, wondering who put the poison in this because normally Yurin wouldn't lose his life to poison. Something had changed the flow of the story, and now that he thinks about it, there was something that hadn't happened yet. Remembering his father next to Colin, wondering why he hadn't been named the official heir yet. Was it because he started training? In any case, the poison in the food probably came from them. He swallows the little that was left. Suddenly, another system screen appears before him. It notifies him that the conditions for weak paralysis poison have been met. The boy announces he's finished eating. It was so good it brought him to tears, leaving Eren shocked. Yurin says he wants to be alone for a while and asks if she can leave. The bodyguard simply accepts, telling him to rest as she will see him tomorrow. Yurin agrees and wishes her a good night. When she leaves the room, the boy turns to the mirror, saying that now he's going to check on the Tang clan of Sichuan, commanding the creator's eye to appear. The system shows his stats, and the synchronization rate, which had dropped to 97. Yurin says it's a smart interface. And if he focuses only on the part with the plus icon, he sees that he now has skills in poison, martial arts, and hidden weapons. First, he decides he'll check the poison skill. With only the weak paralysis skill unlocked, but he has no internal technique. The protagonist noted there were many poisons, and he had to go down as far as he could. He saw that the final poison was invisibility. This meant he had to unlock the previous ones first. It was a tier system. To get the most basic one of all, weak paralysis, he needed an internal technique. It made sense since the Tang clan of Sichuan used internal energy to store their potions. Now he would check the martial arts. There were 3 options for martial arts: the Black Poison Arts, Thunder Needle, and the Divine Energy of 10,000 Poisons. Yurin said it was an easy choice, especially for a Wookiee fan. The Black Poison martial arts focuses on poison. The Thunder Needle martial art focuses on hidden equipment. And the Divine Energy of 10,000 Poisons technique takes longer to improve, but it allows him to enhance both his poison and his hidden equipment. Choosing that technique right away, the system sent an energy to him. Yurin said it was unbelievable. As the technique's mantras were simply engraved in his mind, he had to try circulating his energy right now. Taking off his shirt and sitting on the bed, he gathered energy in his danshin. The young man noticed a strange flow throughout his body. This must be chi. He had to guide it through the meridians and store it in his danshin to build his internal strength. The next day, the young man finished his concentration. He said it was amazing. Those martial arts novels weren't lying about training all night without sleeping. This was real, and he didn't feel tired at all. In fact, his body was full of energy. He could feel a flow of ki around him. He could tell how many birds were outside the window without even looking. He also felt a warm energy in his danshin. And now, if he circulated ki in his head without a mirror, the status window would open. It showed he was at 1 star in the technique. The protagonist felt a familiar aura outside the door. He looked over just as Erin opened it, calling for her young master. She had come to wake him up, but since he looked untouched, he must not have slept. Yurin replied that it just happened that way. She responded that it wasn't good and he should rest for today's training. The protagonist refused, saying he was already on his way. He felt incredible and was in great condition, so he had to train. Erin agreed and said she would prepare breakfast first. Leaving the room, she wondered when the young master had started to gain muscle. Outside at the training ground, Yurin approached the daggers that were on the table. He said it was true. As he picked one up, he prepared to throw it until he noticed something different. Right before his eyes, there was a crosshair, just like in first-person shooter games. So, he would aim precisely at the target, moving his body quickly while Erin watched with concern. Yurin threw the weapon. It pierced the target, releasing a purple aura. He said he really did it, and his guard was impressed. The protagonist also unleashed the hidden weapons from the system. Erin called out to the young master, questioning what he had just done. The protagonist answered that he didn't know either, guessing that the results of last month's training were starting to show. She replied, "No way." Completely shocked, Yurin reflected that this was the first time he had seen her like this and wondered if he should try again. He held the dagger once more. He thought that when he threw it, something felt like his internal energy was surging from his danshin. And that was good because this time he would throw it faster and stronger. Throwing it once more against the target, he embedded the dagger in its center. The target even broke. Erin was completely astonished by this, and the protagonist kept a smile on his face. He thought that having a crosshair like in a game was basically using a hack. Believe it or not, there used to be a first-person shooter game called Battle Attack, and he had won the tournament at the local LAN center. Erin questioned what on earth that was. The protagonist asked if she felt anything different about him, and the guard repeated his question. She said yes, and besides the fact that he had lost more weight than yesterday, she couldn't really tell. The protagonist questioned her about losing weight. Erin confirmed it. He was training every day and drinking Churain soup, but today he had changed more noticeably. The protagonist was confused and wondered if she couldn't feel the internal energy flowing in his body. This meant that in this world, only he could use internal energy and no one could detect it. He had gained an incredible power. He laughed as he wondered if he should keep practicing. He hit the target twice in a row with extreme ease. He said that this time he would try something different. He embedded one dagger into the handle of another that was already in the target. He said it was perfect, leaving his guard astonished once again. She asked if she could try once. Holding the dagger, she aimed calmly. The girl threw it with all her strength, but it didn't even reach the target, hitting the side instead. Yurin said there was something she wasn't able to do, and the girl got frustrated. Then the young man suddenly noticed something. A status window had appeared above her head. She had unlocked the direct cut skill. The protagonist repeated the part about it being executable with any weapon. He said he would test it while Aaron got irritated that it wasn't working. He wondered if he should try it with this. He told Aaron to step aside for a moment. She questioned what was in his hand since he was holding a broken wooden sword. The protagonist raised it to its highest point, feeling a great deal of internal energy flowing from his danshin to his arms. Then he threw it, executing the direct cut. That broken sword embedded itself in the middle of the target, shattering everything around it. Aaron was impressed and asked what in the world that was. She wanted to know what kind of power the young master had. Aaron replied that he wasn't sure. Maybe it was just practice. His bodyguard replied that was impossible. The protagonist said he knew she reported his training to his father, so he had a favor to ask. He wanted her to keep this matter a secret for a while. Aaron questioned this, and Aaron explained that he was testing many things right now and would explain himself later, so she should wait. She simply accepted, and so the day passed. The household staff said their goodbyes, wishing them a good day and saying they would see them tomorrow. The same routine happened with a man named Peru, who simply accepted. He walked calmly by and then changed direction. Aaron watched this with a cold expression. He decided to use the creator's eye on him. This was Peru with an affinity of 0 and the powers of poisonous touch and agile movement. Aaron realized this ability allowed him to put poison in his food. It was definitely this guy. So, he would finally conduct the real test. The arrow floating in his hand would go straight for this man. Whispering the invocation for the paralytic poison, his aura descended to his 2 index fingers. Peru suddenly felt something strange in his body. He turned around suffering and screaming that his body couldn't move. The protagonist approached the fainted man, saying the test was a success. He could see the total duration was 1 hour. He would move this man first, picking him up on his back. As night fell elsewhere, Peru was in pain. The protagonist told him to snap out of it. He wanted to know if he had come to his senses and if he knew who he was. Peru trembled with fear. The protagonist said that if he wanted to live, he should answer correctly. He asked if he was the one who put poison in his soup. He had a few questions for this man. Peru should blink once for yes and twice for no. He asked if he understood, and Peru blinked once. The protagonist decided to ask again, wanting to know if he was the one who poisoned his soup. Peru looked at him coldly and just blinked once. Aaron asked if the poison he gave him was the Hanyang herb. Peru was startled and blinked once more. Moving on to the next question, the protagonist said that the one who ordered him to do the poisoning was Martian Ka. Aaron was surprised by the answer as Peru had denied it. He told that bastard not to lie. He said he could tell everything, and if he lied, his neck would get a dagger mark. Now he would ask again, wanting to know if the one who gave the order was Miss Ka. Peru became even more frightened and denied it again. The protagonist thought he didn't seem to be lying and wanted to know who it was, but he would put on an act for a while. He told him to eat this and swallow it. It was called the initial poison. The man swallowed, and the protagonist said that from this moment on, he had exactly 1 month left to live. If he didn't take the antidote he had by the end of the month, all the organs in his body would melt. For now, it was better to follow his orders. He asked if he understood, and Peru agreed. Now, the protagonist touched his head, trying to release the paralysis poison, and just like that, the man was no longer restrained. The protagonist told him he could move and speak now, and Peru accepted. Aaron said he would ask one more time. He wanted to know who had ordered him to poison him. Peru trembled slightly in fear, saying it was the Knight Commander, Carrick's Living. He had ordered the young master to die like a soldier before the year was over. The protagonist thought that he was Ka's older brother, appointed commander, because of his connections, but that wasn't important. He handed a paper to his new subordinate. Peru questioned if all of those weren't poisons, and the protagonist thought that few people have as much knowledge as this guy. Then he told him that someone like him should be able to get them on the black market and should take Carrick's money. He must bring all the poisons, starting with the one he already has by tomorrow night. Peru questioned why he needed all these poisons. Aaron replied, wanting to know when he had given him permission to ask questions. The subordinate just understood fearfully. Aaron turned around, saying they should go. And besides, from today on, all his medicinal soups should have a lot of Hanyong grass. Peru questioned this, completely shocked. Back in his room, the protagonist said that this was incredible, and martial arts are truly strong beyond measure. And he even fell for his initial poison where he just mixed a few leaves together and the man believed it. But anyway, for now he needs to master the Tang's 4 heavens martial arts quickly. If things go differently from the path he wrote, terrible events would happen around the world. After a full day passed, Peru called for the young master, informing him that he had brought all the poisonous herbs he had on hand. He left some ginseng and leaves on the table. The protagonist said this was Hanyang grass, the reverse green creeper, and the other was a croink leaf. Peru was surprised, asking how he knew since they were all rare toxic herbs. Yurin replied that it was very basic and reflected that he could see all this with the status window. But he changed the subject, asking why he had the other poisons if the Hanyang grass would be enough to take his life. Peru responded that Hanyang grass takes a long time, and if a resistance develops, anyone can withstand it. If mixed with the green creeper, the effects grow stronger. The protagonist summarized that if the poisons were combined, they grew stronger and became harder to detect. He wanted to know where he had learned about poisons. Peru said that when he was 8 years old, he was sold to the living Tyne family and learned from a poison master. There were about 20 children, but they all lost their lives, and only he survived. Yurin thought that without an affinity for poison, children wouldn't survive long, and he didn't seem grateful to the family. So, he had gained a useful person. He said that he did well, and that was all for today. Peru thanked the young master and wished him a peaceful night. The protagonist was left alone in the room and thought it was time to start. With these poisonous herbs here, he was going to eat them all. He brought one to his mouth. The protagonist felt like he was going to vomit from the taste. His system notified him that all poisons had been ingested and there was great danger, so he must meditate and level up to level 2. The protagonist took a deep breath, trying to concentrate with all his might. After another day, Erin knocked on his door, telling her lord that it was morning. She noticed the young master was already up and was surprised. As he was sitting on the bed meditating, she questioned what on earth had happened to his body. The protagonist reached 2 stars and acquired the draconic treasure martial art and 3 more poisons. He then woke up with a smile on his face. She wanted to know what in the world had happened to the young master. But she smelled a strange odor and complained about it. The protagonist just accepted it and scratched his head. He reflected that it's true that when internal energy in martial arts advance a level, a lot of impurities are expelled from the body. Then he walked over saying it stank a little, and he should open the window. I told him not to, and to go straight to the bath. Later in the day, she led the young master. Yurin laughed, seeing that he was learning the movements of the Draconic Steps martial art, a movement technique optimized for assassination and evasion used by the Tang family. He couldn't believe he was learning something that only appears in novels. He thought about just imitating the movements for now. Erin called for the young master and turned around. She wanted to know why he was suddenly walking like a drunk and what was wrong with his body. The protagonist replied that he was fine and she shouldn't worry. He laughed as he walked from side to side. Erin questioned if he was really okay. He was going to training hall 1 today, and there were many nights there. The protagonist confirmed he would definitely be fine. He was just curious about how the other knights trained, and she didn't need to worry about him. Erin told him they were almost there. The knights trained hard, swinging their swords up and down and from side to side. One knight was surprised and questioned who that person was. That woman was the eldest young master's servant, but they wanted to know who the handsome young man behind her was. People were astonished when they remembered the young master had lost a ton of weight from training. They wondered what kind of magic he used to stop being a useless pig. The protagonist thought that it didn't matter if these guys whispered quietly. His internal energy allowed him to hear everything. Erin pointed to a guy in the hall focused on training. He seemed to be an apprentice knight, but his posture was excellent, and he would probably become a novice soon. These moves were basic forms of rock swordsmanship, so the young master should watch closely as Yurin noticed that guy. He was Clyde, a key character in the novel who becomes the protagonist's ally. He had never written about his past before he was found. Clyde swung his sword up and down, and Yurin thought it was interesting he was in a place like this. A good opportunity would come later. Anyway, today these knights who had a negative affinity with him would become his test subjects. First, he would test the chain poison, choosing a purple-haired knight as his target. He decided to activate the chain poison, and the knight felt a sudden pain. He fell to his knees as other people ran toward him. They wanted to know what was wrong and if he needed to go to the bathroom, but the man denied it. He was salivating as he tried to endure the pain. He fell to the ground, and the knights shouted that they needed to call the priest. But suddenly the man's pain disappeared, and his captain questioned what was wrong. The pain was gone, and the captain asked if this bastard was playing a joke and told him to go to the bathroom. The knight tried to argue that he really was in pain. Yurin said that was good. This time he would activate the soul dismantling mist, which causes fear and confusion in a target within a certain range. Suddenly a knight heard a loud bang. The man in front of him had turned into a terrifying demon. Erin noticed the man on the floor, screaming for the demon to go away. She questioned why they were like this. In his nightmare, the man faced a demon and a skeleton trying to take his life. He cursed it, but suddenly everything vanished. They asked what that was all of a sudden. Yurin thought that he couldn't let them lose their lives, and that was enough testing for today, because it was impressive. He then announced he was going back for the day. Erin questioned if he was leaving so soon, and the protagonist replied that it was noisy there, and he would go to Hall for his plan. On the way, they met a girl. She said a guest had arrived for the young master. Miss Ilya Marcus had come to see him. That woman at the window said that this time she would really break Yurin's resistance. She turned to the protagonist, who just said her name. The girl suddenly blushed, and Yurin asked if she had arrived. Ilya didn't recognize him and asked who he was. Before, when a maid called and said Ilya Marcus was waiting, the protagonist thought his feisty fiancé had come to visit. This was probably the time she demanded to break off the engagement, but Yurin kept refusing and telling her not to be ridiculous. The young man said the situation couldn't be helped. Back in the room, the protagonist answers that it was him. Yurin. The girl is surprised, and he says it's been a while. Ilya says she heard a rumor that he'd lost weight from training, but she thought it was obviously fake. After all, it hadn't even been 2 months, yet he'd changed so much. The protagonist says it was because he worked hard, leaving Ilya confused. After being beaten by her, Yurin thought for a long time, and then he decided to change his life. Ilya asks if he wants to fight for revenge, but the young man denies it, kneeling because he's grateful to her. He was able to come to his senses and is truly sorry for what happened. If she wants to break off the engagement because of it, he would accept. She just asks who he is, as she doesn't recognize him. Yurin says he was the former trash of the Rox family. Again, he says he's sorry for everything he's done. Ilya is surprised by this. The protagonist thinks that, to be honest, it wasn't his fault, but the original owner of his bodies. The reason he was asking for forgiveness was specific. Ilya wasn't just a simple heroine. She had the Sword Queen ability, which only improves her swordsmanship. Later, she saves the fallen protagonist and even cuts down the final villain, all thanks to her ability. That's why even if they broke the engagement, it would be beneficial to restore their relationship and make her his ally. But Ilya tells him to stand up, asking if he's serious about this. Yurin says yes and promises, but the girl refuses, telling him to swear on it, while emanating a terrifying aura. The protagonist thinks it's a suffocating pressure and that he's seen this scene somewhere before. Ilya says he doesn't want to live like before, and if he breaks the agreement, she'll beat him to death. The protagonist is confused because the original Ilya said this to the protagonist. Either way, he can't breathe and mutters about the myriad poison of the electric divine art. Ilya is surprised as the protagonist stands up. She questions how he resisted her aura, but the protagonist accepts and swears it with a sweet smile on his face. Ilya gets embarrassed and turns to leave, saying she'll be keeping an eye on him. If he messes up one more time, they'll break the engagement. No matter the reason, the protagonist is surprised they haven't broken up yet. At the Lord's castle, Wellington asks if she found Yurin, and the girl confirms it. He asks if she's made her decision. Ilya confirms it once more and says the engagement would not be broken either way. Wellington asks for the reason. Ilya explains that her father always said people can't change, but there was a rumor that he had, and she was curious. She was wondering if he had returned to being the weak but gentle Yurin from her childhood. Instead, he became a completely different person, and that was the reason she wanted to believe in him one more time. Wellington asks if that's all, and the girl affirms it. But if he goes back to being trash, she would beat him to death with her own hands. Wellington says that's to be expected of a great warrior, and that she should take care of Yurin. Ilya decides to go on her way, and the Lord asks her to stay for a few more days. The girl explains that she told her father she was going to break off the engagement, so it was a bit awkward. Wellington asks if she's going to see Yurin before she leaves, but Ilya says no because he's training and she doesn't want to interrupt. The day passes and Yurin asks why his father had called for him. He denies it, wanting to know who he was, and the protagonist doesn't understand the question. Wellington laughs, saying it was a joke and that he had really worked hard, but he wants to know if he knows the reason he was summoned. Yurin asks if it's about the start of his night training. Wellington says he's right and that he has become sharp as well. Now he will learn the Rox family's swordsmanship, and the protagonist calls out to the Marquis, saying he has something new to tell him. His father asks about the throwing arts as he wants to learn that instead of swordsmanship. The protagonist confirms it, and Wellington replies that it's unacceptable and that this vulgar skill is used by bandits. With that technique, he wouldn't even get close to earning knight's armor or defeating a low-level monster like a Barak. Yurin says they should make a bet then about whether or not he can hunt a Barak with a dagger, and if he was so confident, they should bet. His father sighed, saying he's being needlessly stubborn. A warrior's blade needs aura to destroy auric scales. So unless he had practiced throwing for 100 years, he would never be able to pierce them. The protagonist says, in that case, he must be sure of his victory, so he should make a bet with him. His father calls him reckless and says he'll take this chance to completely crush his stubbornness. He asks for the conditions of victory. Yurin replies that if he defeats a burrow with his dagger, he'll take care of his own training, and if he fails, he'll do whatever his father commands. As the day goes by, the protagonist thinks it's good that Aaron didn't report his training and that the real test is tomorrow. He wonders how many tries it will take to pierce a Barak's scales. Just in case, he'll eat some poisonous herbs tonight and raise his divine body of myriad poisons to 3 stars. He turns around when he hears a noise. Aaron calls for the young master and says she's delivering a message from the marquee. Tomorrow at 12 o'clock, the place would be the first training center. He asks if even she knew about the bet, and Aaron replies that not only her, but the entire state was already aware. Thanks to that, the whole place was bursting with laughter right now. They were all talking about how the young master would wet his pants in fear or run away when he saw a burrow, and they were having a good time talking about it. After all, the young master is still public enemy number 1. Yurin says that in that case, all these people would be watching tomorrow. And Aaron confirms it. The marquee wouldn't stop there, and the training center will be completely packed. The young man mutters, complaining that it's the price of fame, but he wants to know what Aaron thinks will happen. The girl says it will probably be the young master's day to shine. His divine body of myriad poisons technique reaches 3 stars, and the great time for the test arrives. People celebrate while shouting for or against the young master. Yurin says it's truly embarrassing. His father starts the event asking if his son is ready. The young man confirms, but says there's a large audience. Wellington says he only told his mage, but somehow the news spread to everyone. He should try not to be embarrassed by it. The mage announces he will begin and uses his short-range summoning magic. Yurin thinks he's finally going to see magic with his own eyes. A bolt of lightning suddenly strikes the battlefield with a creature taking shape amidst the smoke. The protagonist thinks there's something even more incredible than that. Seeing a monster he created as an author right in front of him. Burrow, a sea monster about 5 foot tall. The people think they shouldn't look at it and that it's scary. The protagonist is impressed, as this is what it looked like. This monster, the burrow, was something that came to his mind while eating purple fish sashimi. He was full of ideas for monsters. If it weren't for the legs and arms, it would even be a little cute. The monster charges at the young man. Yurin just notices the attack and dodges, getting behind the creature. The people are impressed, and the Lord says it's not over yet. Burrow turns around confused. The protagonist thinks he just moved forward without even thinking. But it wasn't as fast as he imagined. First, he'll see how hard its scales are, drawing a dagger. Then, he notices something different. There's something like a target marking one of the creature's weak spots. The protagonist decides to try it and swings his arm to throw the dagger. His ki flows into the blade, and it hits the creature's weak spot. The burrow suddenly feels extreme pain, falling to the ground, lifeless, preventing any kind of entertainment for the audience. The protagonist complains, thinking it went down in just one hit. The people are impressed, and even Wellington is completely shocked. Everyone shouts for the young master, saying he really did it. The young master had defeated the Barak, and it was so cool. They applaud him until a voice calls Yurin a brat, asking how in the world he did that. The protagonist says he aimed carefully and hit the right spot. His father complains that he can't accept it. A Borak had lost its life to a simple dagger, and that was impossible. The protagonist questions if the great Marcus Rocks would go back on his word. His mage calls the Marcus, saying that under the Borak's arm was a scaleless spot, and the young master hit it right there. Wellington complains that it was pure luck, but the protagonist says a bet is still a bet. His father asks to go just one more round. He'll add another promise instead. If he wins this time, no matter what he asks, he'll be granted one wish. But if he loses, he must go back and learn swordsmanship as they agreed, which excites the protagonist. His father says that this time his opponent will be a knight, not a burrow. He asks if he'll accept the challenge now. The protagonist says yes. It didn't matter to him. He thinks that on the contrary, this was his chance. He was going to deal with the commander of the knights, Cox. He wonders if this could be the opportunity to break the guy's arrogance, but he still wants to keep Peru's poison and decides he should let him go for now. Wellington says that a fully trained knight would surely be too much for him to handle, so he would put an apprentice in his place, making it fair enough. The protagonist thinks about it. He wonders if he could choose the knight. He chooses Clyde as his opponent. The man walks toward the arena with his sword on his back. He says the Marquis has summoned him, and Wellington notes that he seems very confident he was going to give Clyde a task. The apprentice accepts, saying he will follow any command from his lord. He tells him to straighten that kid out, and Clyde turns around. The young master just nods at him, leaving the swordsmanship apprentice completely confused. Wellington asks what's wrong, and if he wasn't confident he could do it. Clyde denies it and says he'll do as ordered. The protagonist tells him not to worry too much. He's just going to throw 3 daggers, and if Clyde blocks all 3, he can't consider it a victory. Wellington questions if he sees the brat's arrogance, and says Clyde must teach him a real lesson this time. Clyde readies his sword, and the protagonist circles the arena. The knights say that if he loses, there's no dinner for him tonight, and he'll have to run a 100 laps around the training field. A person in the audience with a female voice says that the young master can do it. He thinks that whoever it is, they were rooting for him. Clyde calls out to the young master. He announces he's ready, and Yurin turns around as well. He prepares his first dagger, thinking he'll start by turning out the lights. But he notices something strange compared to the fight with the Borik. His opponent had many more openings. If he hits one of them, he could take his life. He won't let that happen. Throwing his first dagger, he was just going to go straight for it. Clyde says it's a good one and tries to defend with his sword. He is forced back about 4 steps because of it. The crowd wonders what that sound was, as it sounded like a cannon blast. Wellington tells him to wait and notices the dagger falling to the ground. He picks it up, wondering how so much power could come from a common dagger. Clyde trembles in fear. His sword peers through. The protagonist asks if he's warmed up now, as he can see what happens if he lets his guard down. He tells him to get ready, because this time he was going to throw with everything he's got. He emanates a pressure that makes the aspiring knight tremble. The protagonist thinks that he is still a main character after all. He won't lose like this. Yurin decides it's time, preparing his dagger for a direct throw. That thunderous blast happens once more and approaches the knight. Clyde tries to counterattack with his long sword, but a collision with an immense noise takes over the arena. As the smoke begins to clear, the people are astonished. The Marquis can't believe the result, as Clyde has fallen to his knees. He trembles with fear now, his sword broken in 2 pieces. He lets it go, leaving Marcus Wellington speechless. He calls out to Yurin, telling him they should talk, just the 2 of them. The protagonist says the match isn't over yet. There is still 1 dagger left, and Amaris questions it. He says that was enough, but Yurin decides he will ask him directly. He calls for Clyde to raise his head. He calls out to his young master. The protagonist asks if he's going to end the battle like this, and if someone who wants to become a knight would accept such humiliation, victory, or defeat, a knight must swing his sword until a clear end. That was the way of a knight. He then shouts that he will ask Clyde one more time if he's going to give up like this. The knight murmurs a little, calling for the young master, but then he orders them to bring him a new sword. He gets up, emanating an energy as he says he won't back down like this. The knights are stunned, and the Maris asks how a rookie was awakening his aura like that. Yurin thinks that, as expected at this opening point, Clyde's berserker skill manifested. Now he can test higher-level techniques. The opponents stare each other down for a few seconds. Clyde calls out to the young master, telling him to throw his dagger. Wellington denies the situation in his thoughts. For so much aura to manifest, it was a talent on the level of a high-ranking knight. He wonders what Yurin will do, and the protagonist simply replies that it's good. He takes his last dagger and puts all his strength into it. He throws it awkwardly toward the man. Clyde wonders what that was and why it was so slow this time. He yells that Yurin is just messing with him. He then tries to cut the dagger down, but it just swerves around his sword. He's confused, and Wellington realizes what's happening. The dagger embeds itself in Clyde's shoulder. It nearly pierces his bones, causing the knight agonizing pain. He falls to the ground, groaning in pain. The crowd wonders what that was, saying it was too slow. They say Clyde should stop exaggerating and ask if he's going easy on him just because he's the young master. The protagonist thinks not. There must be more internal energy embedded this time, causing excruciating pain. His father calls to Yurin, telling him they'll talk later. He won the bet today. The protagonist flashes a smile. Clyde suffers from the pain in his shoulder, but the protagonist touches him, telling him to wait a moment and use his energy absorption. Clyde realizes the pain is fading. He thanks the young master, and Yurin says it was nothing. The knight asks for his forgiveness. He explains that when the dagger came flying slowly, he thought the young master was underestimating him, but that wasn't it. It was a precise technique. Not even a master could have such a technique in so little time. So, he must have been hiding his true strength. He asks if there's a secret faction targeting the Maris' family, and if that's why he was hiding his strength until now. He says it's no wonder it seemed strange that only the young master was left behind. It was a noble sacrifice. Yurin thinks this guy always loved conspiracy theories, as Clyde says the young master's attitude was laudable. He says that when Yurin fights the secret organization, he should just ask if he needs him. The protagonist wonders when his favorability got so high. He accepts and says they'll meet again later, thinking that Clyde is a simple-minded berserker with a good nature. Clyde tells him to trust him, as he will spread the word that the young master was never trash and will make sure everyone hears the rumors. Staying close to Clyde could be useful. One day he'll be able to handle missions on his own, and that would be helpful. Erin says the young master worked hard, and Yurin thanks her. She mentions his last technique, saying she's never seen anything like it. The protagonist says it was a new skill and asks what she thought. Aaron says that watching it, she began to wonder. If she had faced it without seeing it first, she would have lost, but now she's sure she can block it. The protagonist thinks she wasn't bluffing. Among her abilities was the mirror of a quiet mind trait, which was rare and powerful. Yurin replies that she's been training as a knight since she was a child. If she hadn't become his guard, she would have been a knight. He asks if she's satisfied with how things are now. Aaron doesn't understand the sudden question. As the day passes, Wellington rests in his office. The protagonist enters the room, asking why the Maras summoned him. His father calls him an idiot, saying that when it's just the two of them, he could call him dad. He was killing the mood. Yurin just accepts, still puzzled. His father asks what exactly that technique he used yesterday was. Even after looking through books, he's never seen such a strange move. It had been a month since he started training, and no matter how rare a genius is, learning a technique on his own was impossible. He questioned what had happened and demanded that he tell the truth. The protagonist thought that he couldn't tell him the real story, but he had a good one prepared. He explained that he had found a book and his father asked about it. The young man confirmed it. While he was walking in the state library looking for manuals, he stumbled upon a book. He wondered who had left the book on the floor. As he leaned his back against the wall, suddenly a book fell from the top of the dusty shelf. There was no title on the cover, just a strange symbol carved into it. The protagonist didn't think much of it and opened it. A light shot out from within, carving something directly into his mind, and then the book vanished completely. Wellington said that meant it was a magic tome. The protagonist nodded his head. He reflected that a magic tome was a rule he had made up himself. It held the power for a great mage to pass on their techniques. The Lord said that magic tomes work that way, and even if he didn't know how, it might have been brought by his ancestors. Finding that book was a great stroke of luck for him. The protagonist decided he would call it an unexpected windfall. His father stood up, saying a promise was a promise. He wouldn't make him learn swordsmanship anymore, and as an addition to his promise, he should say what he desires. The protagonist called to his father in a calm voice. He said he would like the position of heir, leaving Wellington shocked. But if he did that, his father couldn't guarantee it. Wellington thought for a moment and said that with his authority, he could. The protagonist wondered why he seemed so uncomfortable. Because if he became the successor, it would be a problem. There would be many who would oppose the Marquise's house, especially the young lady, who would cause a huge commotion. So this time, he would make a concession. His father questioned this, but he quickly accepted and thanked him. Yurin thought that he had no interest in the position of successor anyway. If he became the heir, he would be stuck with the Marca all day, receiving education related to state management. Instead, he wanted to use his time to improve his skills in the four heavens of the Tang clan and travel the world to gain opportunities. Wellington told him to name something else he desired, and the protagonist said he wanted to form his own order of knights. He wanted Aaron, who was currently his butler, and Clyde, who he duelled with earlier as his two knights. His father replied that it wasn't as difficult as the position of heir, and Aaron was a precious talent too, so it would be a waste to keep her as a butler. He should do as he wished, and Yurin just thanked him. The Lord asked about his butler since there weren't many left at the moment. Yurin replied that there was someone named Peru working in the kitchen and he wanted him as his butler, but he would appreciate it if the Marquis would be the one to take the blame for giving him this chance. Wellington asked if something was going on, and Yurin replied that he would explain later. His father just accepted with a sigh. The protagonist thought that his father seemed to trust him and didn't even ask questions. Stopping to think, he had no idea how his favorability had grown. Maybe it was just because he was his son. Outside, the protagonist announced that from this day on, the two of them were members of his exclusive order of knights. For now, they should train hard during practical training, and they should also welcome their new butler, Peru, who simply asked them to take care of him. Aaron watched this in silence. She remembered she had a question for the young master yesterday. She wanted to know why he would put someone named Peru in her place as a butler. The protagonist scratched his head and replied that he was a spy sent by Commander Karox of the White Eagle and Miss Ka to take his life. Aaron said that even if that was true, she couldn't trust him nearby as a butler. The protagonist replied that now he only listened to his orders. Clyde told the young master that he had a question. Yurin replied that this was good and told him to go ahead. The aspirant replied that even with just the two of them, it was an order of knights, but it should have a chief or commander. Originally, the chief was the one with superior skills. But Aaron was delicate and small, and she didn't look strong, so he should be the chief. The protagonist replied that he was right. The strongest knight should be the chief. So from now on, these two must have a duel. Only a few seconds passed before Clyde admitted defeat with Aaron holding a sword to his neck. She said his attack patterns were too simple and needed a lot of improvement, telling him not to give up on his training. Clyde accepted and said he would keep her advice in mind. The protagonist simply accepted and announced that with this the leader of this order of knights was decided. It would be Aaron. He applauded her along with Peru. Peru announced he would prepare dinner first. And so the day passed. The young man thought he was far enough away, but could still feel his energy. He should test his new technique. It involved using internal energy instead of voice to create sound waves and deliver them to his target's minds, a technique often used in Wukia stories. So he called out to Peru mentally. He replied to the young master turning around, but he noticed he wasn't nearby. The protagonist repeated his name a few more times, leaving his butler completely confused and scared. Yurin asked why he seemed so surprised, and Peru complained that he was going crazy. He wanted to know if it was some kind of black magic, and the protagonist replied that it was a type of communication. Peru said that just as he thought, he wasn't just affected by poison. He had heard that black mages can use both, so the young master must be something like that. The protagonist was confused and told him to think whatever he wanted. He asked if the poison he requested last time was ready, and Peru confirmed it. Snake's mind. A poison extracted from 100 venomous snakes was ready. The protagonist told him to make sure to put a lot of the poison in his celebration soup. Peru trembled with fear upon hearing this, but accepted, saying he understood. The next day, the protagonist opened his eyes after meditating. He sighed deeply once more, thinking that he was still at the 3-star level, and his internal energy wasn't growing as he had hoped. He didn't know how much time he had until the world's crisis, so he had no choice but to leave the Marquise's estate for now. He went to his father's room and announced that he was planning to leave. Wellington asked about it, since it had been a while since he had gone out. He must be thinking of some city in the Marquisate. The protagonist confirmed it, and his father asked how many days he would be gone. Ern reflected that he was going far away, but he didn't need to reveal that, so he said he was thinking about a week. His father said he understood since he had been training a lot, and asked who he wanted as an escort. The protagonist replied that he didn't particularly need one, leaving the lord confused. He told his son to be aware of his position, as he was the eldest son of Marcarax. The protagonist replied that he was just going to a nearby city, so it would be strange to have an escort. Wellington shouted that he still didn't know how difficult the world was. He might have become strong, but he was afraid of him being poisoned. The protagonist thought that poisons didn't work on him anyway, but it seemed it would be difficult to persuade this man. He said he would do as he asked, and his father asked when he would leave. The protagonist replied that it would be in about 2 days, and Wellington decided he would prepare the escort. In his room, Yurin thought that an escort would be useless since he was going to run away tomorrow. As evening fell that day, the protagonist called Peru to his room. He explained that he was going on a trip, but had no money and was asking him to bring some. He must have the money Crocs gave him to buy expensive potions. When asked if he wasn't planning to hand it over, Peru denied it and said it was an honor, so he would bring it anyway. The protagonist asked if he had anything else, because the last time he saw him bring poisonous herbs, he had a subspace pouch. It was a common item in fantasy novels, one that could easily hold about a ton. Peru said he would give it to the young master, though he was very reluctant. Yurin accepted and thanked him since he wouldn't need a backpack anymore. But anyway, he told him to take something else, showing him his fake medicine. He said it was the 1-mon antidote for his poison. The protagonist said that since he was doing a good job, he was counting on him in the future, and if he did well, he would give him the complete cure soon, which made Peru excited. The next day, near dawn, Yurin mentions he left the package, so he should leave stealthily. He walks through the mansion with extreme ease. The young man thinks that as expected, no one was around. A gardener notices the young master and says hello, mentioning that he woke up very early today. The protagonist just goes along with it, thinking he feels a lot of power coming from this benevolent-looking green gardener. So he decides to use his creator's eye, but he's surprised by what he reads. With the rest of the day ahead, the protagonist notes it's his first time out since leaving the Marquise's castle. He notices something different, the magic tower. A mage at the desk sees the young man and asks how he can help. Yurin replies that he'd like to use the portal. The mage asks if he's used it before, and the protagonist says no. The young receptionist informs him they offer a mileage system, and the protagonist reflects that it's just like airplanes. The mage asks for his destination. Yurin answers that he's going to a Sioux castle. The receptionist notes that it's quite far and says he understands. The fee is 50 gold, and after paying, he needs to sign the passport. The protagonist reflects that it's expensive as expected, but it's a good thing he has plenty of money. For now, he'll use a nickname, Paolon, which is what he used in games. The mage asks the gentleman to follow him. He's told to enter a room, and that when he hears a knock, it means he has arrived. The protagonist enters and reflects that it's a beautiful arrangement. Suddenly, a bolt of lightning strikes the top of the castle. Yurin is confused, but a man informs him that he has arrived and can now exit, welcoming him to ASU Castle. Yurin asks how he's already there since he didn't feel a thing. The mage replies that using the portal is comfortable, a point of pride for mages. Yurin reflects on this feeling, wondering if he included something like this comfort in his story. The mage asks the client to use their services again and wishes him a good journey. The doors open and the protagonist comes face to face with a completely new place. This was Castle. Perhaps because it was an eastern region different from the Marquis's domain, the architectural styles were different. Besides that, there are many people around. First, he needs to find a blacksmith ally, so he asks a local for information. He heads to a small house in an alley. Yurin reflects that he's been searching for a while, but can't find the unicorn blacksmith. The sky was already growing dark. This was the last place, and he needed to check it soon. A sword lay on an anvil, and a blacksmith struck it with his hammer to shape it. The protagonist asks if anyone is there. The blacksmith notices the new customer, and the protagonist confirms that's what he is, but he'd like to ask about something. Among the blacksmiths here, he wanted to know if he happened to know someone called the unicorn blacksmith. The man replies that he doesn't know any blacksmith by that name around here. Yurin wonders if he came to the wrong place, but the blacksmith says that in any case, that was the name he planned to use for his shop soon. Yurin uses the creator's eye on him. He sees his name is Gynox, and that he has the demonic weapon creation trait. The protagonist thinks he's found the right place. He asks if he can take a look at the weapons he's selling. The blacksmith tells him he can go this way to browse. Yurin examines all the weapons and armor on the wall. He asks how business is going, and the blacksmith is confused, but he says that since the shop is at the end of the hall and his skills aren't amazing, even though customers come by occasionally, they usually just look and leave. He's not sure how much longer he can keep this up. The protagonist reflects that this is interesting as the equipment here is no joke. He sees the Wind Spirit Rapier, which increases attack and movement speed, and also the Fire Spirit Longsword, which boosts strength and stamina. He asks if he made them himself. Jiren says yes, but when he finished them, they turn out to be major failures. Once crafted, the swords became abnormally heavy, and even a strong man couldn't lift them. So, no one decided to buy them. Yurin thinks it's because unworthy hands touch the blades. If the right person were to hold them, the sword's power would emerge, and he still doesn't know how its true will works. So, he announces he'll take both swords. Gynox replies they are failed pieces, but the protagonist says they're perfect to give to Aaron and Clyde. Reflecting that this wasn't the treasure he was looking for, he says that anyway, he wants to know if he has any very rusty weapons. The man doesn't understand. He shows him a box full of old tools. He says it's strange for him to ask for rusty weapons, and that he was setting these things aside to sell later. These things wouldn't be used anyway. The protagonist puts his hand in, saying that this is just as he configured it. Gynox notices the weapon and replies that he didn't make it. It was already in the warehouse when he got here, and he has no idea where it came from. He was thinking of throwing it away since it was junk, but he kept it. The protagonist says he'll take the dagger, too. And Gynox is surprised. He says that since he only chose defective weapons, he'll charge just 2 gold and give him the dagger for free. The protagonist thinks this is a bargain because if the true nature of these weapons were revealed, he couldn't buy them for less than 200 gold pieces. But more than that, it was the blacksmith he wanted. So he brings up his failing business again and offers him a deal. Close the shop and become his personal blacksmith. Gynox says this is very sudden and doesn't know how to respond. He's not exactly against closing, but it's very abrupt. The protagonist decides to introduce himself first. He is the invincible spear that guards the south. Yurin Rocks of House Rocks. Gynox is shocked to hear the name of the young master of the Maris's family. He then kneels asking for the Lord's forgiveness, as he never imagined he would come to such a filthy place. The protagonist tells him to stand up. Gynox replies that there's no need as it's comfortable like this, and tells him to speak freely. The protagonist accepts, but insists he should still get up thinking that he can't escape the feudal mentality. Gynox asks why he wants to employ a poor blacksmith like him. The protagonist replies that it's because of his special talent. The blacksmith says he has no such thing, and that his master used to beat him every day. The protagonist reflects that he seems to have been trained in a brutal Spartan style. He then says that he visited many forges and saw various weapons today, but his were different. He showed great care and dedication to them. His swords were finely made, and especially their grips were meticulously crafted, which is vital to prevent a sword from slipping in battle. Seeing that dedication, he believes that one day he will awaken a truly special gift. The protagonist wonders if he can really recruit him. Gynox replies that he will follow the young master, but he really wasn't like the rumors said. The protagonist asks if he means the one about him being trash. In any case, he's going to show the blacksmith something fun. He places the tip of his finger on the dagger and then commands it to awaken with his blood, for it is the relic Agnes of a million forms. The weapon begins to levitate and leaves the protagonist's hand. The blacksmith wonders what that is. It looked like a legendary ego sword, and Yurin thinks that originally the protagonist was supposed to obtain it. The system asks if he wishes to form a soul contract with Agnes, and the young man proceeds. The soul takes on a different form with a strange kind of voice. It asks what the hell this is and who he thinks he is to make a contract with it, because he has no talent anyway. The protagonist thinks it's disappointed by the lack of mana coming from him, but this way of speaking is very arrogant. The sword says this is annoying and that a useless guy like him wants to make a contract. Anyway, it wants to know how he knows about its release enchantment. The protagonist replies that he heard it from a great prophet, thinking he just made that up to make his story consistent. Agnes questions how the great prophet would have told anything to someone so useless, but says that in any case, he must know about its abilities, and the protagonist confirms. Agnes was a free-form weapon that could split into a primary and secondary body, able to become any weapon the user imagined. In the original story, the protagonist uses a sword and shield. Even if the secondary weapon is lost, it just returns to the main body. Agnes says he must not know how to use it, as it can only be wielded with mana. This should make him give up. The protagonist watches in silence, muttering that she was the noisy type. He points at the weapon, thinking he can wear it like a ring. Agnes says it was hot and felt like she was melting, while the protagonist thinks that internal energy works well with mana. Anyway, he calls for Gynox. He asks how long he wants to stay, and the blacksmith replies that 2 days would be enough. In 2 days, at dusk, the protagonist would meet him at the castle's central park. On his way there, he recognizes a voice. Ilya asks what is going on and why he's there, leaving the protagonist confused. The protagonist has the same question, thinking the scene in front of the central park felt familiar. It was the scene where the original protagonist meets Ilya for the first time. The girl asks what's wrong with Yurin, and he apologizes, thinking the original story has changed. Ilya dismounts her horse, saying she had asked why he was there. The protagonist replies that he was looking for a blacksmith. She questions this since the Rox family had many. Yurin answers that he wanted to hire someone himself. The girl says if he had told her sooner, she would have helped, but the protagonist had already found someone good. He was just arriving, and Gynox calls out, "Young master." He asks if he had been waiting long, but the protagonist says no, that he arrived at the perfect time. He introduces his fiancée, Ilya, just as someone interrupts, calling for the team leader. They were about to leave, and he wanted to know who this person was. Ilya calls over Musk and introduces her fiancé, Yurin Rox. The man repeats the name fearfully. He says it's incredible to see a member of the Marquis Rox family in a place like this, introducing himself as the commander of the 5th Division of the Marcus Family Knights. His name was Musk Malone, and the protagonist says it's a pleasure to meet him. He reflects that he already knows enough, but to put it simply, this guy was a pathetic extra with an annoying personality. In the original story, when Musk and his knights were on the move, children blocked their path. The protagonist intervenes, a fight breaks out, and Ilya appears just in time to stop everything. That's how their relationship started. But the important part was this. The original hero was supposed to accompany Ilya into battle and save her from a life-threatening situation, but he couldn't just wait for that hero to appear. So he has no choice. He can't let her die. He calls out to the girl and asks where she's going. Ilya replies that because of the growing waves of orcs around ASU Castle, her knights were ordered to subjugate them. The protagonist says he has a favor to ask. In that case, he wants to go with her, and Ilya asks why. The protagonist explains that as someone in training, he wants to experience real combat and test his skills. Ilya warns that it could be dangerous, but the protagonist just accepts, saying he's good at running. The girl stares for a moment, thinking she agrees and orders her Musk to arrange for a horse. He tries to argue that they aren't going on a trip, and with orcs around, they can't let their guard down, especially since he can't sense any mana from him, and he has no obligation or desire to protect someone. Ilya calls his name one more time. Sir Musk, it's an order. He should stop talking and just do it. Musk mutters his acceptance, saying he will prepare it if it's an order. He would just do it, of course, all while radiating killing intent as he looks back. The protagonist and Ilya look at each other in silence. As the day goes on, she remarks that it's dangerous and her fiancé should stay close. Yurin simply agrees. He tells Gyronox to hold on tight, and he accepts the young master's order. And so the army begins to advance. In the area ahead, Ilya announces that for now, they will split into groups of 5 to find the orc village. They're not to attack first, but to fall back and signal if they find it. So they split up, and she heads down one path, turning with her group. They advance, and the day fades into night. A soldier comments that the tracks are far apart and hard to follow. Plus, it's getting dark, and he asks what they should do. Ilya says they have no choice and that they will turn back for now. But a sound suddenly startles the group. It was a signal flare, then another from a different direction and more from other locations. Ilya asks how many they've seen so far. The total is 5, but hears to himself that there are only 4 since he hasn't signaled. The leader decides to head to the northwest desert first, so they start riding in that direction. As they get closer, Ilya notices something. All her soldiers are dead. The members of her group are horrified. Even their armor has melted. They wonder what could have hit them. Ilya orders them forward toward the signal flare from the south. They ride in that direction with extreme haste. She finds the same thing when she arrives. All her soldiers are dead. Her companion warns that they must move to the next area quickly, but Yurin interrupts, saying they can't go now. Ilya questions this, calling her husband's name. The protagonist warns that the orcs are hunting the soldiers one by one. At this rate, they have no chance of victory. They must stop the operation and use a signal flare to gather their forces here. One of her soldiers tells him to be quiet, that he knows nothing about advancing in formation like this. This is all a mess because of a punk like him. Yurin thinks that in the original story, the protagonist was also blamed. He was cursed by the readers for dragging them through such a frustrating plot. He's having post-traumatic stress just thinking about it. Musk says he knows nothing about battle, but the protagonist tells him to shut up, leaving the soldier completely shocked. He suddenly falls to the ground in pain, and Ilya cries out in disbelief. She calls out to her fiancé as he tells the subordinate to know his place. Musk understands and begs for forgiveness. While the protagonist says he's been watching, he turns to Ilya, thinking how in the original story she didn't listen to the protagonist and got lost in her own thoughts. Yurin tells her to judge the situation for herself, asking if now is really the time for that. Ilya admits that just as he said, she failed to think about the situation calmly. They must send up the blue signal flare immediately to gather the troops here. The signal flares up into the sky moments later, visible throughout the forest. Yurin rests with the group. Gianox says the young master was incredible. He made them move according to his will. The protagonist replies that it was nothing. The blacksmith says the soldiers will gather here again, but Yurin says maybe because most of the soldiers won't be able to make it. He reflects that it's because of that bastard Karuta. Gianox calls out to the young master, asking what he's waiting for. The protagonist replies, a real battle. A subordinate runs toward them, calling for the squad leader, telling her to run, that she should just get away now. Ilya questions him, raising her sword toward a noise. An immense group of orcs is walking toward them, a massive army. Musk complains that it's an insane number of monsters. Ilya is stunned. She apologizes to Yurin, saying they're going to die because of her. The protagonist replies that it's all right. We're not going to die here. She asks what her fiancé is going to do. He calls for Agnes and says they're going to test what they've been practicing for the past 2 days, using the fake body to create black iron pellets. The 3-star skill he got from the body, which he hadn't had a chance to test yet, was black iron explosion. He then throws the pellet toward them, and it radiates immense energy. The ball just hits an orc's axe, and they start to laugh until an explosion happens, engulfing the entire area. Their numbers decrease significantly from the protagonist's single blow. He waves his hand, commanding the black iron explosion to return. Thinking that Agnes' ability synergized with his own skills, the other orcs decide to charge at the young man, but he just throws the ball again, causing another immense explosion in the area. Ilya asks what he just threw. The protagonist says they are black iron spheres, and that he'll explain in detail later. However, the number of orcs has dwindled significantly. Ilya asks her army what they're doing. They can win this. Now's our chance. We must defeat the remaining orcs. Charging at the creatures, Ilya manages to sever one of their heads. Her subordinates with great effort manage to pierce another. One of the watching orcs is stunned, but this time he comes face to face with a reddish figure. He looks up in fear just as the figure grabs his head with its hand. Ilya and her army turn around suddenly. She wonders what that thing is. It was absurdly large, and the creature had just blown up the orc's head. The protagonist thinks that he's finally here. That was Karuta, the legendary orc warrior. If they don't capture this bastard today, they will all lose their lives. Karuta lets out a roar that torments everyone in the area. He sets his sword in a stance and leaps toward Ilya. The girl thinks she needs to dodge, but her fiancé grabs her, asking why she's just standing there, pulling her away from the attack's impact. He says they almost lost their lives. Ilya is stunned, seeing that her subordinates are dead. Karuta roars as he stares at the protagonist. Yurin just throws a black iron explosion at him. It nears the orc's neck and then detonates. But Karuta remains untouched and roars once more. He mutters something as he walks toward the protagonist. Yurin wonders if it's not working. The setup was for an orc warrior, and its skin was as hard as steel. Ilya curses the bastard, questioning how he dared to take her subordinates' lives. She emanates her sword aura, saying she won't forgive this. Then she charges forward with her skill at extreme speed, clashing her sword against the orc warriors on equal footing. They exchange a few blows, but Karuta remains unshaken, just defending against everything. The subordinates cheer for their team leader, saying she's so cool. Yurin thinks that as expected of Ilya, her sword queen trait was broken, but it was still the beginning of the novel. To think she's strong enough to push Karuta to this point and even cut through his armor and skin. The monster gets enraged when it's truly hit for the first time, catching the girl's attention. He lets out a roar as he emanates his aura, and Ilya wonders how he's able to do that. Karuta glances to the side and swings his sword quickly, forcing Ilya to block. Just like in the original story, Ilya was defeated by Karuta. The soldiers go to take care of